She was young, driven, a rising professional with a warm smile, a loving family, and a future brimming with promise. But one thing, just one, set in motion a chain of horrors. She said no. It wasn't loud. It wasn't cruel. It was just clear, a boundary, professionally drawn. But to the man who had decided she was his, that one word became a declaration of war. And that war ended with blood on asphalt, a life stolen, a workplace forever haunted. This is not fiction. This is a true story about entitlement, obsession, and the terrifying reality that saying no can sometimes be a fatal act. You're watching Shadow of Crime Chronicles. And today, we expose a chilling case of Alyssa Moore, the woman who was murdered because she said, "I'm not interested." Welcome back to Shadow of Crime Chronicles, where we uncover the disturbing truths behind the crimes hiding in plain sight. Every case we cover peels back the layers of society, where power, control, and obsession often lurk beneath the surface. If you haven't already, hit subscribe, click the bell icon, and like this video to support our journey into the darkest corners of the human mind. Let's begin with the heart of this tragedy, the life of Alyssa Moore. Alyssa Marie Moore was born on August 14, 1995, in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. The parents Harold and Sandra Moore, a middle-class, church-going couple known for their community involvement. Alyssa was the youngest of three daughters, and from the start, her presence brightened every room she entered. Her father, a retired high school history teacher, called her Sunbeam. Her mother, a nurse at a local pediatric clinic, recalled Alyssa as the child who hugged too long. Growing up, Alyssa was known for her empathy. While other kids fought over toys, Alyssa was the one sharing hers. She had an intuitive gift for knowing when someone felt left out, and her mission seemed to be making others feel seen. In school, she excelled academically, but her teachers often said it was her emotional intelligence that set her apart. She could read a room like a book, one of her middle school counselors said, and if someone was hurting, she couldn't rest until she helped. Alyssa attended East Chapel Hill High, where she was voted most likely to make a difference. She participated in peer mentorship programs, student council, and co-founded the school's first anti-bullying initiative after a classmate attempted suicide. She earned a full scholarship to UNC Greensboro, majoring in marketing with a minor in psychology, a combination she chose to understand both people and business. During her junior year, she interned at a mid-sized marketing firm where she impressed the team so much that she was offered a full-time role even before graduation. By 27, Alyssa had climbed to a mid-level analyst role at RiverTech Solutions, a software-based marketing and analytics company in downtown Greensboro. Known for her data-driven campaigns and innovative customer engagement models, Alyssa had a reputation as the golden girl of her department. Her supervisor, Clara Jennings, described her as a rising star who made the workplace feel human. But Clara also remembered the emails Alyssa had shown her, the ones from Dennis Blake. At first annoying, later unsettling. "I remember the way she laughed it off at first," Clara said, "but I also remember the fear in her eyes later." Dennis Ray Blake was born July 3, 1987, in Greensboro, North Carolina, to Marilyn Blake, a single mother and an unknown father. From the start, Dennis' life was marked by instability. His mother, who suffered from bipolar disorder and alcohol dependency, moved frequently. Dennis changed schools 7 times before the 8th grade. Teachers often described him as withdrawn and oddly intense. While he had a high IQ and performed well in math and science, his social development lagged behind. He often became fixated, first on comic books, then classmates, then teachers. By age 12, Dennis had been suspended 3 times, once for bringing a knife to school to protect himself, and twice for verbally threatening classmates who rejected him. Counselors recommended psychological evaluation. Notes from his middle school records mentioned traits consistent with obsessive love disorder, though he was never formally diagnosed. In high school, Dennis began retreating online, into chat rooms, gaming forums, and later, message boards where he absorbed toxic narratives about rejection, entitlement, and male grievance. By his 20s, Dennis had little in the way of friendships, no long-term relationships, and a growing belief that women didn't respect nice guys like him. He earned a computer science degree from a local tech college and landed various IT support roles, eventually joining Rivertech Solutions in 2021. Co-workers described him as competent but socially uncomfortable. He rarely joined lunch outings, kept to himself, and was known to over-explain things to female colleagues. Alyssa, who joined a few months after him, became the object of his fixation. "I think he mistook her kindness for something else," a male co-worker later testified. And when she set a boundary, he couldn't handle it. By the time Alyssa had been with Rivertech Solutions for a year, the signs were already surfacing. Dennis Blake had become a persistent shadow in her daily routine, appearing at her desk under the guise of IT check-ins, sending friendly yet oddly intense emails, and standing a little too close in the break room. At first, Alyssa tried to be polite. She gently declined a coffee invite. She didn't respond to weekend texts. She smiled less around him. But Dennis took none of it well. Instead of withdrawing, he began to escalate. He started leaving sticky notes with compliments on her monitor. One Tuesday morning, she found a single rose taped to her office chair with a handwritten card. "Some people are just born to be adored. You don't even realize how special you are. DB." That was the moment Alyssa documented everything. She took photos of the note, the rose, and emailed HR. The company's HR manager, Rhonda Simmons, scheduled a private meeting with both Dennis and Alyssa. In that session, Alyssa, composed but firm, outlined her discomfort. Dennis sat with crossed arms, avoiding eye contact. When Rhonda asked him to explain the rose, Dennis replied, "I was just being nice." She didn't have to take it the wrong way. HR issued a verbal warning and documented the incident. Dennis was told to maintain professional boundaries. He nodded, said nothing. What no one knew was that later that night, Dennis wrote 6 pages in his private journal under the heading, "She humiliated me." The next day, he stopped speaking to anyone, but he kept watching. It was a Thursday evening, and the weather was unusually mild. Alyssa stayed late at work to finalize a report. A few others lingered, but the floor grew quiet after 5:30 p.m. Dennis left at his usual time, or so it seemed. Security logs later revealed he clocked out, but never left the building. Instead, he made his way to the back staircase, where he waited. At 6:13 p.m., Alyssa gathered her things, slung her tote bag over her shoulder, and exited to the side door, her path illuminated only by parking lot lights and the fading sun. She texted her sister at 6:14. "Leaving now. Talk when I get home." Red heart. Her car was parked in Lot B, a dim area near the shipping dock. As she approached her car, a figure emerged from behind a trash enclosure. It was Dennis. The surveillance footage has no sound, but it shows the moment clearly. He approached quickly. Alyssa turned, startled. He gestured animatedly, almost pleading. She shook her head, tried to step away. Then he reached into his jacket. What happened next unfolded in less than 20 seconds. Dennis lunged. Alyssa tried to run. He grabbed her by the arm, spun her around, and stabbed her once in the chest. She fell back, gasping. He stabbed her 6 more times, in the torso, neck, and shoulder. Then he dropped the knife, looked at her one last time, and walked away. A nearby employee, James Elder, who was just exiting the side entrance, heard a scream. He ran toward the sound and found Alyssa bleeding, barely conscious. He dialed 911. "There's a woman. She's been stabbed. Oh, God, there's so much blood. She's not moving." Paramedics arrived within 6 minutes, but Alyssa was gone before they could stabilize her. Time of death, 6:23 p.m. She was 28 years old. That weekend, hundreds gathered outside Rivertech Solutions for a candlelight vigil. Alyssa's parents, Harold and Sandra Moore, stood together in silence as her sister, Jessica, spoke. She was smart. She was kind. She was careful. And she still died because someone thought they were owed her affection. People wept. Others stood frozen. The company offered grief counseling, but for many, grief gave way to anger. How had this happened in a professional setting? Had they missed the signs? Could more have been done? The news of Alyssa's murder quickly went viral. The hashtags #JusticeForAlyssa and hashtag she said no began trending. Women across the country shared their own experiences of harassment, of being followed, of threats after rejection. One viral tweet read, "Every woman has a Dennis. Some are lucky enough to survive him." After the murder, Dennis Blake disappeared. He walked east, changed clothes in an alley, and tried to purchase a Greyhound ticket using cash. But law enforcement was already circulating his image pulled from security footage. At 8:52 p.m., police arrested him at a bus terminal, just 12 blocks from the crime scene. He had a backpack containing $700 in cash, a disposable phone, a second knife, Alyssa's photo folded into a journal. His hands were still stained with blood. He surrendered without resistance. Inside his apartment, detectives found 37 notebooks, each filled with obsessive writings, diagrams, and charts. One entire book was dedicated to Alyssa, her schedule, what she wore each day, her friends at work, his predictions of when she might change her mind. In one chilling entry dated February 20th, "She doesn't see me, but she will. They always do. It's not rejection. It's just resistance. I'll break through, one way or another." Psychologists would later describe the writings as delusional, narcissistic, and dangerously fixated. But they also proved one thing. Dennis had planned everything. By August 2023, nearly 6 months after Alyssa Moore's murder, the state of North Carolina versus Dennis Ray Blake was scheduled for trial in Guilford County Superior Court. The courtroom was packed on opening day. On one side, Alyssa's family sat still, their grief palpable. Her mother, Sandra, clutched a framed photo of her daughter and wept quietly as the judge entered. On the other side sat Dennis, pale, sunken-eyed, and emotionless, dressed in a wrinkled gray suit provided by the state. He refused to make eye contact with anyone. His defense team entered a plea of not guilty by reason of insanity, a move that sparked public outrage and controversy online. Prosecutor Maria D'Angelo, known for her unflinching style in domestic violence and stalking cases, began her opening remarks with a tone that silenced the entire courtroom. "This is not a case about misunderstanding. It is a case about control and what happens when a man decides that a woman's no means he has a right to end her life." She laid out a clear, premeditated timeline emphasizing Dennis's history of obsessive behavior, Alyssa's documented complaints, the evidence collected from his journal and apartment, his calculated plan to confront her after hours. The defense, led by attorney Charles Redding, painted a drastically different picture. Mr. Blake is not a cold-blooded killer. He is a deeply mentally ill man who fell through the cracks of a failed system. They presented early diagnoses of mood instability and argued that Dennis lacked the ability to control his impulses, citing undiagnosed personality disorders and childhood trauma. But the jury was unconvinced by rhetoric alone. What followed were 2 weeks of intense, emotionally charged testimony. Jessica took the stand with composure, wearing a soft blue blouse, the same one Alyssa once borrowed on a weekend trip. She spoke directly to the jury. "My sister was the kind of person who would stay late to help a new hire finish a project, who would buy a co-worker lunch just because they seemed down. She didn't flirt. She wasn't leading him on. She just existed." Her voice cracked as she added, "And somehow, existing was enough to get her murdered." Clara's testimony gave context to the workplace concerns. She confirmed Alyssa had expressed worry multiple times, but didn't want to cause drama. She recounted the HR meeting and how uncomfortable Alyssa had been with the whole ordeal. She was worried Dennis might retaliate, but not like this, not to this degree. The prosecution's expert, Dr. Adler, gave a brutal clinical assessment. Dennis Blake showed traits of erotomania, a delusional belief that someone, usually of higher status, is in love with them, but he also demonstrated calculated awareness of right and wrong. She referred to his steps to conceal the knife, his planned escape route, his decision to leave no fingerprints on the handle. "Those are not the actions of someone disconnected from reality," she said. "Those are the actions of a man who knew what he was doing and wanted to get away with it." Dennis's legal team attempted to bolster their insanity plea by presenting school records of early behavioral issues, Notes from a psychologist who briefly evaluated Dennis at age 15. Testimonies from a distant cousin claiming Dennis had always been off. But under cross-examination, these efforts collapsed. Prosecutor D'Angelo asked the psychologist, "Did Dennis Blake ever receive a formal diagnosis of psychosis?" "No." "Was he ever hospitalized for a mental disorder?" "No." So we are to believe he was too mentally ill to understand murder, but sane enough to buy a second knife, delete browser history, and flee the scene? Silence. Against his counsel's advice, Dennis chose to testify. He entered the witness box and spoke with a flat effect. His voice was slow, almost mechanical. He told the court, "I didn't mean to kill her. I just couldn't take the way she looked at me, like I didn't exist. She smiled for everyone else. Why not for me?" When asked if he understood he had committed murder, he nodded. "Yeah, I guess I did." His lack of remorse stunned the courtroom. Even the judge appeared visibly disturbed. After 3 hours of deliberation, the jury returned with a verdict. The jury, find the defendant, Dennis Ray Blake, guilty of first-degree murder. A gasp erupted in the courtroom. Sandra Moore dropped her head into her hands and cried. Jessica gripped her father's arm, silently sobbing. The judge issued the sentence the following morning. For the murder of Alyssa Moore, you are hereby sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Dennis said nothing. He was led away in chains, his face blank. Sandra Moore gave a final statement at sentencing. "I will never forgive him. I am not that holy. But I will fight for every woman who is followed to her car, for every daughter who has to pretend to smile so a man won't snap. My daughter is gone, but her story will not disappear." The courtroom stood in silence. Alyssa's name was etched into more than just court documents. It became a symbol, a reckoning. What happened to Alyssa Moore wasn't an isolated event. It wasn't a random crime. It was a result of a dangerous belief that a woman's no is negotiable or worse, an insult. In the weeks after her murder, a wave of national conversations emerged across social media, news outlets, and advocacy groups. The hashtags #SheSaidNo, #EndEntitlementViolence, and #BelieveWomen trended for days. One op-ed in The Atlantic asked plainly, what kind of culture creates men who believe rejection is a threat to their identity? The answer? A culture where masculinity is often defined by dominance, where men are taught to pursue her until she gives in, where women are expected to be nice, even to men who scare them, where setting a boundary can be perceived as a challenge, not a right. Many armchair analysts pointed fingers at mental illness, but the prosecution made it clear Dennis Blake wasn't insane. He was entitled. He didn't hallucinate a threat. He didn't lose control in a dissociative state. He planned. He waited. He struck. This case echoes others like it. Mary Kay in Chicago, shot by an ex after refusing to reconcile. Elena Rodriguez in Texas, stabbed in her apartment by a rejected classmate. Chanel Fox in Atlanta, murdered in her driveway after declining a second date. These are not mental health failures. These are failures of boundaries being disrespected and of women being punished for asserting autonomy. For many, Alyssa's story opened a painful conversation about workplace harassment and the inadequacies of corporate HR systems. At Rivertech Solutions, HR had documentation, evidence, and a clear complaint. They followed protocol, a verbal warning, private discussion, and a recorded file. But verbal warnings don't stop obsession. Policy isn't protection. As one advocate from Safe Work USA put it, workplaces aren't prepared for stalkers. They're trained to handle awkwardness, not danger. Following the trial, Rivertech faced internal review. They pledged to implement mandatory stalking and harassment awareness training, private reporting channels, increased evening security, a partnership with domestic violence prevention services. But for many of Alyssa's coworkers, the change came too late. In November 2023, State Senator Dana Kilpatrick introduced the Alyssa Moore Workplace Safety Act, a legislative proposal that aims to mandate written warnings and investigations for any stalking-related workplace complaint, require security escort services for employees reporting harassment, create a national database of workplace harassment violators, similar to background checks for firearm buyers. Fund free trauma therapy for victims of workplace stalking. The bill, still in discussion at the time of this writing, has received bipartisan support and overwhelming public approval. No one should fear walking to their car after work, said Kilpatrick. No one should lose their life for saying no. Across the internet, women shared stories on the tag #MyDennis. Not as an attack, but as a reality check. The stories were eerily similar. I told a guy at work I wasn't interested. He started showing up at my gym. I blocked him. Then he created fake accounts and sent threatening messages. I smiled once. He thought we were in love. It became clear Alyssa wasn't the first. She wasn't even rare. She was just the one whose story ended in bloodshed. Experts who studied Dennis's behavior agreed on one thing. This wasn't love. This was ownership. Psychologist Dr. Lena Hargrove summarized it this way. People like Dennis mistake interest for entitlement. When they are rejected, they feel humiliated. That humiliation becomes rage. And that rage, when combined with need to dominate, becomes lethal. In his journal, Dennis referred to Alyssa not as a person, but as a concept, a goal, a trophy he believed he deserved. And when that trophy said no, he responded not with grief, but with violence. Sandra Moore, Alyssa's mother, has since become a speaker for the Silent Survivors Network, an advocacy group for families affected by stalking-related violence. At a 2024 summit, she stood before a room of 400 people and said, "If I could talk to my daughter one more time, I'd tell her it wasn't her fault. Not for being polite, not for reporting it, not for existing." She ended her speech with the line, now etched onto a plaque outside Rivertech's building. Her name was Alyssa, and she should still be here. Alyssa Moore didn't die because she walked down the wrong alley, or because she trusted the wrong man, or because she was the wrong thing. She died because she drew a line, a firm, professional, human line, between herself and someone who thought no was negotiable. She died because he thought he was owed her, and when he couldn't have her, he ended her. In the end, Dennis Blake didn't love Alyssa. He didn't even know her. He loved the idea of power. He loved the feeling of pursuit. And when that pursuit was denied, he chose destruction over dignity. This case isn't rare. It's just raw. And it's real. It tells us something chilling. In a society where women are taught to shrink themselves to stay safe, where being nice is a survival tactic, where even professionalism isn't protection, we are all responsible for how we confront obsession, control, and entitlement. Because the scariest part of this story is not that Alyssa died. It's that this could happen to any woman who says no. Here at Shadow Crime Chronicles, we do more than tell stories. We honor lives. We question systems. We refuse to let silence bury truth. If Alyssa's story moved you, if it made you angry, if it reminded you of someone you love, subscribe to our channel. Tap the notification bell to never miss another case. Speech balloon comment below with your thoughts, your stories, or your support for the Moore family. And most of all, share this video. Not because it's shocking, but because it's common. And because Alyssa's story should never be forgotten. Because in the shadows of our culture, some crimes are repeated again and again until someone finally shines a light. This has been Shadow Crime Chronicles. Till we meet again, stay alert, stay aware, and above all, stay human.